Okay, creationism versus evolution. We're looking at age dating methods. Some are radiometric, others are other kinds. Let's look at BibleStudyManuals.net, K53. That's where we left off. And we're going to look for the section where evolutionists maintain, according to Dr. Baugh, there are elements in the rock, such as radioisotopes, which indicate an Earth age of millions and in some instances billions of years. There's a question mark there. There is no data scientifically known which can give a rock a uniform age. Matter of fact, in the rock strata throughout the world, certain rocks, which the textbooks in geology give as a certain age, appear in all different places and have different ages according to their system. Yet they demand that the textbook is the ruling authority. But if it contradicts itself throughout the world, most of the time, all of the time, then what do you have? You have no reliable information. All of the processes for dating radioisotope material and alpha particle decay known to science give a variant in age determination when various portions of the same rock are examined. So even the same rock, if it has radiometric capacity to measure, like uranium or potassium, argon, and so on, the same rock will have different ages, and they are measurably longer or shorter. When the alpha particle decay rate is examined, which is the interpretive line of measurement, it is found that it takes uranium-238 over 4 billion years to lose its half of its mass. The line of reasoning goes that it had to have been around for at least 4.5 billion years to have lost that much mass. But the presumptions to begin this measurement aren't proved, because the radioactive capacity of materials today is not necessarily that of years ago. For example, when the ice canopy covered the Earth, blocking ultraviolet radiation from the sun can excite radioactive type materials to radiate even more. But if it's blocked, the radioactive decay rates are much, much less. That's why Dr. Baugh says this is not necessarily so. It really shows that U-238 was designed to be around for 4 billion years, for billions of years, and it was designed to be here for a useful purpose. But that doesn't mean that it is that old. A car can be designed to last a long time. So you look at it and say, oh, that car's going to last 10 years. Yeah, you just took it out of the showroom. It is obvious from the work of geophysicists that these isotopes were at one time inside the Earth. They were expunged or thrown out to the surface of the Earth. What this demonstrates is that the interior of the Earth at some time in the past was a perfectly balanced thermonuclear heater. If these isotopic elements are so arranged with moderating elements adjacent to them, the result is simply a controlled nuclear reactor. God designed the interior of the Earth as such for the benefit of man. Now we're going to look at alpha decay and the potential barrier. He goes on to say, with respect to the alpha decay process, which is the most important process from the standpoint of geologic time measurement, according to this concept, although the energy of the alpha particle is apparently too small to permit it to escape from the nuclear potential barrier of energy surrounding the nucleus, nevertheless it has a certain small probability of doing so. According to classical mechanics, the incoming or outgoing nuclear particles can pass the potential barrier only if their kinetic energy is larger than the maximum height of the barrier. Experimental evidence shows, however, that this is definitely not so. An example is represented by a uranium nucleus, which has a radius of 9 by 1013 centimeters, 1013 centimeters, and is surrounded by a potential barrier 27 MeV high. Since the alpha particles that escape from the uranium in the process of its natural decay have an energy of only 4 MeV instead of 27, it is difficult to understand how they get across the barrier at all. It turns out, in fact, that the wave mechanics of a particle permit it to do things that would be completely prohibited in classical mechanics. Okay. So, using wave mechanics, we can calculate that the chances of getting through are about 1 in 1038. George Gamow, what he wrote, the symbol MeV stands for a million electron volts. Okay. An electron volt being the energy imparted to a single electron when it is accelerated by a 1 volt electrical potential. Similarly, Kev stands for 1,000 electron volts, Bev for a billion electron volts, and so on. The probability of escape of an alpha particle through the energy barrier erected by the high nuclear forces in the atom depends upon the relation between the energy of the particles and that of the barrier. And these factors vary in some incompletely understood manner from one nuclear species to another. The nearer the energy of the alpha particles to that of the barrier, the more probable is the escape of any single particle, and therefore the more rapid the general decay of the nucleus. Thus, the decay constant of any given radioactive element depends on the relative energies contained in its nucleus. Now we look at the topic, external energy sources. Herein lies the reason for the apparent constancy of these decay rates. The energies are so high that any ordinary external energy source, whether physical or chemical, is entirely too low an order of magnitude to have any effect. After Rutherford became completely persuaded that the radioactive decay of heavy elements is due to the intrinsic instability of their atomic nuclei, his thought turned to the possibility of producing the artificial decay of lighter and normally stable nuclei by subjecting them to strong external forces. True enough, it was well known at that time that the rates of radioactive decay are not influenced at all by high temperatures or by chemical interactions. But this could be simply because the energies involved in thermal and chemical phenomena are just much too small as compared with energies in the nuclear disintegration phenomena. Now we're getting to a point here about how accurate the evolutionist statements are about radiometric dating. So Rutherford proceeded to bombard his nuclei with high-energy alpha particles, and the whole subsequent history of nuclear physics has demonstrated the possibility of penetrating the nucleus through the potential barrier, provided only that a source of sufficiently high energy is used. It is therefore evident that the basic decay relationships could be changed if something were done to change the relationship between the energy of the alpha particles in the nucleus and the nuclear forces creating the potential barrier. Some external source of sufficiently high energy level would be required. Pressures, temperatures, chemical reactions, ordinary radiations are all inadequate, and therefore the decay rates seem to be constant. This is the problem. What if it is a variable at some time or another? Then your age dating method has a flaw. Nevertheless, if an environment of high energy radiation could be imposed on the elements, it seems certain that the balances and therefore the decay phenomena would be altered. Such an environment may be difficult or impossible to impose in the laboratory, and in any case it supposedly could not have been produced at any time in the Earth's past history as a geologic environment, and so could have no influence on the decay constants. But what if there were a catastrophic event that did? That's the issue. If you don't admit that there's a possibility of catastrophism, when there's evidence all around the planet that there is, and there has been, then you're going to say, oh, this is a reliable method to date things by radiometric dating. But this is an entirely gratuitous assumption. Such an environment does exist right now in the Earth's upper atmosphere, where a great variety of radiations, including particles of fantastically high energies, exist in profusion. There it is. Don't have to go to the past. Just look up. If any very substantial part of this radiation has ever in the past been able to penetrate to the lower atmosphere and into the Earth's crust, it must have had some substantial effort and effect on the radioactive decay rates and the unstable atomic nuclei. And in view of the biblical record of the creation and the flood, it seems likely that a large amount of this radiation may have reached the Earth's surface during the creation before the establishment of the Earth's blanket. In other words, before the creation on the second day of the crystalline metallic water hydrogen canopy blanket, which protected the Earth in pre-flood days from outside radiation, as indicated in Genesis 1:6. That's the time that it might have occurred, and most likely did, but not during day one when the Earth was being formed. So, look at this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. In other words, God, the Holy Spirit, put structure and shape to the surface of the earth, its topography. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. Radiations of the entire light spectrum evidently emanated throughout the universe, perhaps other forms of radiation also. Then, skipping to verse 6, we have the formation of the Earth's canopy, which blocked out much of the incoming radiation. Then God said, let there be an expanse. An expanse is a firmament, or rakia in Hebrew, pronounced a solid stretched out sheet of super cold metallic hydrogen. It's with water, oxygen, hydrogen. But super cold makes hydrogen as a metal. Super cold, the hydrogen begins to act as a metal, solid metal, instead of a gas. In the midst of the waters, the two layers of stratospheric frozen waters, in between of which was a layer of super cold metallic hydrogen, and let it separate, be sandwiched in between the waters from the waters, forming a crystalline protective canopy over the earth. And in view of the biblical record of the creation and the flood, it seems likely that a large amount of this radiation may have reached the Earth's surface during creation before the establishment of the Earth's blanket, and during the flood, before a protective ozone layer was formed in order to block out the radiation, immediately after its dissipation, and before the development of the present atmospheric regime. So, we're building an understanding of things that existed in a different manner before what we see as present. The present is not necessarily a key to the past. Some things you can find that are applicable, other things were quite different in the past. We see that because we see evidence of catastrophic events, like water all over the planet that occurred in a great massive flow, and then was the causal effect of the one great massive worldwide ice age, and thereafter led to a warming up to the kind of climate that we have today. So we can move on. We're still looking at radioactivity age measurements and look at the different methods and the external energy sources that might excite that. First we come to cosmic radiation, which we can look at next time.